In the heart of Mexico's Huautla cave system lies the Sotano de San Augustin, a deep, dark network of twisting passages and flooded chambers that has long captivated explorers and scientists alike. Here, a team of highly skilled cave divers gathered for a mission that would test the very limits of human endurance and the boundaries of modern technology. They were determined to delve into the unexplored depths of the San Augustin sump, a perilous underwater tunnel that had repelled previous expeditions. Leading the charge was Ian Rolland, a courageous and passionate 29-year-old who had dedicated his life to the pursuit of discovery. Alongside him were other members of a multinational expedition, all poised to face what would ultimately be a journey into darkness and tragedy. Months of meticulous planning, training, and coordination preceded the expedition, as the divers knew they would be facing one of the most complex and dangerous cave systems in the world. This journey was not a simple dive, but rather a calculated endeavor that combined elements of scientific exploration, physical endurance, and engineering ingenuity. Among the many aspects of the mission, particular attention was given to the advanced technology that would be crucial for the divers' survival. The team utilized a pioneering rebreather apparatus, the cislunar Mk4, specifically developed by renowned engineer Bill Stone. This closed-circuit system allowed divers to recycle their breath, drastically reducing the amount of bulky oxygen tanks they needed to carry, an innovation that held the potential to redefine cave diving itself. Rolland, along with his dedicated teammates Noel Sloan, Steve Porter, and Kenny Broad, underwent intensive training to master the intricacies of the Mk4. They spent countless hours in controlled environments, familiarizing themselves with the device's operations and troubleshooting potential malfunctions. By the time of the expedition, each diver had completed over 7 hours of rigorous instruction and training exercises with the rebreather and had successfully executed 6 preparatory dives. Confidence in the equipment and their skills was high, yet each diver was acutely aware that the risks they faced were profound. On March 26, 1995, after days of trekking and setting up base camps within the labyrinthine caves, Ian Rolland and Kenny Broad finally reached Camp 5. Here, at the edge of the San Augustin sump, they prepared to confront the underwater world that lay ahead. This was no ordinary underwater passage. It was a sump, an underwater tunnel that marked the dividing line between explored and unexplored cave systems. The temperature of the water was a biting 64 degrees Fahrenheit, and visibility was low, ranging from just 5 to 10 feet. These conditions added to the challenges the divers already faced. For Rolland and his team, however, the daunting environment only sharpened their focus. They were on the brink of discovery, driven by an insatiable desire to venture where no human had gone before. In the following 2 days, March 26th and 27th, Rolland and Broad made impressive headway. With careful navigation, they managed to push nearly 1,400 feet into the sump, a remarkable achievement that extended humanity's reach deeper into the Huautla cave system. Along their journey, they stumbled upon an awe-inspiring tunnel, a massive air-filled chamber, roughly 60 feet wide and 40 feet tall. This discovery was nothing short of monumental. It indicated the possibility of additional unexplored sections of the cave waiting just beyond. The team's spirits soared. They knew they had accomplished something extraordinary, perhaps even a landmark in the annals of cave exploration. On March 27th, Rolland prepared to embark on what would be his final dive of the mission. The plan was a challenging one, with a projected duration of 4 hours, a formidable endeavor, even for an experienced diver. Rolland conducted a meticulous pre-dive check of his equipment, ensuring that every component was in working order. His rebreather's life support systems hummed steadily, a reassuring sound that gave him confidence. However, unknown to Rolland, a critical misstep had occurred during his equipment setup. The oxygen cutoff valve, which was customarily turned off at the surface to conserve oxygen, had not been reopened before he submerged. At precisely 4 p.m., Rolland descended into the cold, murky depths of the sump, completely unaware of the tragedy that would soon unfold. His teammates remained behind, their thoughts occupied with anticipation, wholly oblivious to the fatal oversight. As Ian Rolland began his return journey from the second sump, an eerie sensation gripped him. He'd made countless dives before, but something felt different this time. A faint tightness in his chest, an unnatural struggle in his breath. The usual reassuring flow of air from his rebreather was off, almost imperceptibly, but enough for him to notice. He paused, reaching to adjust his equipment, fingers fumbling in the icy water, the pressure of the cave's oppressive darkness weighing heavily on his mind. Each breath was now thin, hollow, like grasping at air that wasn't there. He checked his gauges, trying to focus through the cold and his quickening pulse. But dread washed over him. Oxygen wasn't reaching his lungs. Could it be the valve? The thought hit him like a shock, but he wrestled it away. Surely he hadn't overlooked such a crucial step. Yet as he adjusted and readjusted, his hands were already trembling from the chill and a creeping panic he couldn't quite suppress. His breaths grew shallower as he felt the weight of his equipment dragging him down. With every second, his limbs grew weaker, his vision narrowed, and a terrible fog began clouding his thoughts. He tried to ascend, each movement an immense effort, his body begging for the oxygen that wasn't coming. But his energy was dwindling, his limbs numb from the cold, his awareness slipping away. The lack of oxygen in his rebreather system led him to lose consciousness, causing his mouthpiece to slip out of place. Without a lifeline of air, he began to sink toward the bottom of the sump, where the frigid waters of 64 degrees Fahrenheit took over him. His equipment remained operational, the rebreather still recycling the stagnant air around him, even as he lay motionless. The silence of the sump shrouded his passing, an unseen tragedy unfolding in the depths of the cave. Hours passed, and as Rolland failed to return, concern grew among his teammates. Kenny Broad suited up for a rescue dive at 10 p.m., determined to bring Rolland back to safety. On March 28th, the rescue team, including Bill Stone and veteran diver Jim Brown, descended into the sump with grim determination. Broad's search led him to Rolland's lifeless body at approximately 12:45 p.m., mere yards from the sandbar. The sight was heartbreaking. There, in the cold embrace of the sump, lay a friend and fellow explorer whose adventurous spirit had brought him to these depths, but whose life had been cut tragically short. Following the accident, a thorough investigation ensued. The autopsy revealed that Rolland had succumbed to asphyxia, likely due to immersion in water, though further questions lingered. Rolland's insulin-dependent diabetes was initially suspected as a possible factor, but medical evidence ultimately dispelled this theory. The investigation centered instead on the human error associated with the oxygen cutoff valve, which had remained closed throughout the dive. The rebreather itself was found to be functioning correctly. It was the unintentional closure of the valve that had left Rolland without the essential oxygen he needed to survive. The tragedy underscored the vital importance of protocol and precision, even in situations where advanced technology is involved. On the morning of April 9, 1991, a group of 3 divers set out for a dive into the murky depths of Peacock Springs in Florida. It was a popular site known for its pristine waters and stunning cavern systems, but it was also a place that demanded respect from anyone who entered. The divers were Alex Turner, a 53-year-old man with limited diving experience, his 10-year-old son Max, and their friend Jake Thompson, a seasoned diver with a recent cave diving certification. Alex and Max had been diving recreationally for a few years, but it was Jake who had the most experience. He'd become cavern certified in 1988, and shortly thereafter, he earned his cave diving certification. His skills were solid, but it was clear from the beginning that Alex and Max were out of their depth. Their equipment was basic at best. Alex wore a snorkel, used a heavy weight belt, and carried wrist lanyards on his lights. He didn't have the necessary backup gear such as a secondary reel, which could have been critical later. Max, being young and inexperienced, didn't have the full understanding of the risks either. For Alex, this dive was meant to be an exciting bonding experience with his son. They had been to the local dive sites before, but this trip was different. He saw it as a way to push themselves a little further, exploring a place that held the promise of adventure and mystery. What Alex didn't fully grasp was the danger of diving into a cave system like Peacock Springs, a site typically reserved for experienced divers due to the risk of silt-outs, difficult visibility, and complex navigation. It wasn't just about getting in the water. It was about knowing how to get out, something Alex didn't quite have the skills for. It was sunny and warm, typical for the Florida spring, and the three men prepared their gear by the entrance to the cave. Alex and Max double-checked their scuba tanks and weights, while Jake went through a more rigorous equipment check, aware that cave diving required far more than just the basics. He ensured that his backup lights, reels, and guidelines were in place. It was during this time that Jake began to feel a slight unease. The conditions at Peacock Springs were notoriously difficult, especially the silt that could turn the otherwise clear water into an opaque nightmare. "Let's take it slow," Jake said as they entered the water, trying to downplay his concerns. He led the way, entering the entrance to the cavern zone, and soon the trio was submerged. The water was clear at first, and the divers made their way through the passageway. Jake, leading the group, ensured the guideline was tied securely to a ledge at a depth of 25 feet. This was a precautionary measure, allowing the group to find their way back out if anything went wrong. However, as they continued deeper, the water began to change. The silt, often stirred by the movement of divers, started to cloud the water. What was once clear became a blinding fog, completely obscuring vision. The first sign of trouble came as Jake looked back, noticing the visibility had dropped significantly. His heart pounded as he tried to spot Alex and Max through the dense cloud of silt that now filled the cavern. They were barely distinguishable, no longer in a straight line, and Jake couldn't be certain of their exact positions. Acting quickly, Jake signaled the group to exit and began reeling in the guideline, intending to lead them back to the surface. But the silt out made it nearly impossible to keep track of one another. In the confusion, Jake didn't realize that Alex had become separated. Thinking they were all still together, he continued toward the exit, only realizing the full extent of the situation when he surfaced alone. Jake broke the surface of the water first. The sunlight was blinding after the darkness of the cave, and for a brief moment, he allowed himself to relax. But as he looked around, he quickly realized something was wrong. Max was at his side, but Alex was nowhere to be seen. Jake shouted, his voice cracking with panic. Max, unaware of the gravity of the situation, looked up at his father's friend with confusion in his eyes. Jake's stomach dropped. He immediately signaled for Max to stay put on the surface as he dove back down into the cavern, pulling on the guideline to lead him deeper into the silt-filled darkness. But as he descended, he quickly realized that without a backup line or any clear markers, he had no way of retracing his steps. The silt was everywhere, reducing visibility to almost zero. The guidelines were in disarray, and the further Jake descended, the more he realized just how disoriented they had all become. Minutes passed, each one stretching longer than the last. Jake swam blindly through the dark, searching for any sign of Alex. His mind raced. What had gone wrong? How could they have gotten separated so quickly? Back on the surface, Jake surfaced again and tried to organize a search. But without a proper backup reel or a clear plan, his options were limited. The cave was vast and dangerous, and the risk of getting lost himself was high. Despite his experience, the overwhelming conditions were too much. He surfaced once more, gasping for air and signaling Max to stay calm. Time was running out. It wasn't until a second search team arrived that Alex's body was found. It was at a depth of 25 feet close to the entrance. There were signs that Alex had attempted to find his way back, likely turning off his lights in the hope of seeing some distant glow from the entrance or from his companions. Unfortunately, without a backup reel to establish a home base, Alex couldn't conduct an organized search. His lights had been turned off, and with the heavy weight belt he was carrying, he was unable to regain the buoyancy control needed to make a clear ascent. The investigation into the incident revealed critical missteps. Alex and Max, despite their enthusiasm, lacked the training and equipment necessary for the dive. Alex's choice of gear, particularly the lack of a backup reel, the weight belt, and a snorkel instead of an extra air supply, proved to be fatal. Experts noted that the heavy weight belt and lack of buoyancy control likely led to a loss of control during the silt-out. This incident showed how easily an inexperienced diver could be caught in a situation that spirals out of control, even with the best intentions.